Now, from CBS 4 News, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning, I'm Jim DeFede, and welcome to Facing South Florida. Later in the show, we're going to sit down with former Miami Mayor Manny Diaz. He recently endorsed Michael Bloomberg's bid to be president. We'll ask Manny about that. But first, as the impeachment trial played out in Washington, President Trump was in South Florida this week to speak to the winter meeting of the Republican National Committee. Joining me now to discuss the president's message to the party's faithful, as well as the role Florida will play in his re-election plans, is the chair of the Florida Republican Party, State Senator Joe Gruters from the Sarasota region. Senator, thank you very much for coming in.
Jim, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so I want to sort of talk about, we taped this, I always like to be real honest, we're taping this on Friday. The president was here yesterday. You greeted him at the airport on the tarmac and got to ride in to Doral with him in the Beast, as well as hear his message. Talk to me a little bit about what the president's message was to the party's faithful, and what did he tell you on the ride in?
Well, first off, what an amazing experience to ride in the Beast with him, and he is such a gracious individual. You know, I've known him. I was his 2016 chairman, and so we talked a lot about that. And it's all about the optimism and hope for the future. And we talked a lot about the campaign, both in 2016 and what we're doing here in 2020. And we're fired up because we've done, you know, just last month we had the most successful fundraiser in the history of the Republican Party of Florida, right here in Miami, where we raised $3.5 million for the base operating budget, which is huge. You know, we have the resources, the manpower, and everything firing on all cylinders. And, you know, of course, they need to win Florida. The president needs to win Florida to ensure that we win re-election. And so he's just overall just very positive. His poll numbers that came out yesterday about Florida, him versus almost every single candidate, he's up almost double digits.
That was from the Florida Chamber.
That's right.
And you just said something I just want to hone in on a second. I interviewed Brad Parscale a couple of months ago. He put it this bluntly: if we don't win Florida, we don't win re-election. Florida is must-win for the Trump campaign. Would you agree with that?
There's no question. Listen, we have two Miami natives running the victory program for us. We have Alex Garcia and Kevin Cabrera. And Alex Garcia is a seasoned political pro. We already have 40 staffers on the ground. We're going to double that in the next month, and I think we'll double that number within the next 2 months. We're so far ahead of where we were in 2016 from an organizational standpoint. We are just really locked and loaded and ready to go. And we're so far ahead of where the Democrats are because they're still divided because there's so many Democrat candidates out there. We're focused right now on the main prize, and that's winning the general election. So the president's very happy with where we are as a state. He's very excited about where we're taking Florida and our party and making sure that we turn out our voters and the ones that are going to vote for him. And
what worries you? If I had to say there was something that every once in a while keeps you up at night or suddenly bolts you up in bed about the way prospects could go in Florida, what is it about that's out there that you worry about in this campaign?
Just voter apathy, probably just people thinking that we're going to be okay. Because listen, I think that certainly privately people talk a lot about how much they support the president, and obviously there's a lot of people out there that don't support the president. And but we want to make sure that people out there get out the vote, get off their couches.
You see this as a base election?
This is going to be the highest turnout in the history of presidential election cycles. I think there's going to be more people voting in this election than has ever voted across the country and I think you're going to get people who have never voted before. We had a lot of first-time voters in the last cycle, but I think when they look at the results that President Trump has delivered for America, 7 million jobs, lowest unemployment, record-breaking financial numbers across the board, 2 dead terrorists, you know, the international peace, right? I mean, the guy is so successful, and he's had such an incredible start. I think people are going to come out in record numbers to support the president.
Well, let me ask you a question. You're an accountant by trade, correct? Yep. You're one of the few non-lawyers actually in Tallahassee. That's a good thing. So you're an accountant by trade. Didn't it used to be that the Republicans used to worry about things like the deficit? And isn't under President Trump, haven't we now hit $1 trillion? What happened to the concern about the deficit?
I think the deficit's always going to be a concern. In the first year, the deficit actually went down. And I think what's going to happen is you saw two big, huge trade agreements. And I think once we're now past that, I think what you'll see is a renewed focus to try to lower that deficit. And it's going to come around. But look at the economic success we've had under the president. You know, this is the first time we've had a president that's so laser focused in helping everyday working Americans be better providers for their families.
He did promise, though, that under his presidency he would expand the economy by 4% every year. He hasn't reached that.
Well, we have 5 years to go, and I think the numbers the numbers are looking good. I mean, like I said, we haven't had this much success. Lowest unemployment amongst minorities ever, lowest unemployment amongst women in 71 years. Really across the board, the guy is just hitting one high note after the next. And listen, here in Florida, we even have an added bonus because we have the most popular governor in the country. And I think combined with, you know, I don't think the governor ever would have won the governorship without the president's support. And what's amazing how politics comes full circle is now I think Ron DeSantis, because of strong popularity across all demographic groups, is going to help carry the president here to make sure that we deliver the 29 electoral votes for the president come November 3rd.
I have no doubt that what's going on in Washington right now with regard to the impeachment trial helps the president with his base, stirs them up, angers them, motivates them. But I'm wondering, do you think that for voters who are in the middle, who may have voted for Barack Obama and then voted for Donald Trump the last time and wanting to give him a try, whether or not they're concerned that all of the chaos that tends to surround Donald Trump, do they want another 4 years of that? Does all of the revelations that have come out, do you think they turn voters off from Donald Trump?
Well, sometimes I say the president's almost like an Olympic figure skater, and from an artistic standpoint, he may not get a perfect score, but from a technical standpoint, I think he gets a 10 out of 10 perfect every time. And I think if you're middle America, the middle voter, looking at what's in the best interest for you as an individual and for your family, first and foremost, it's, are you better off than you were 3 years ago or 4 years ago once the election comes around? And my guess is most people are going to be able to say yes, because the president's had so much success raising real wages across the board, actually focusing on making sure that Americans are first and foremost in his in everything that he does. And it's
one of the areas that the voters do care about, we saw it in the 2018 election, is health care. And one of the reasons why the Democrats took back the House is that voters trust Democrats on health care related issues because they believe the president, and after all, the president is in court trying to take away the Affordable Care Act, trying to take away pre-existing conditions. Why should they trust the president on health care?
The president's certainly for maintaining the pre-existing conditions, and what you have
here. Why is his Justice Department then arguing to strip them out of the law?
What we can't have is Medicare for all. I mean, if you ever go to some of these things that government run, you do not want the government running your health care. Look at these other countries where there's long lines. We have the best health care system in the world. We want to maintain that, and Donald Trump wants to make it more affordable and more accessible.
But why is he trying to do away with pre-existing conditions? Why is his Justice Department making that case in court to try to strip that out of the law?
President Trump wants to keep the pre-existing conditions regardless of what the Department of Justice is doing. I don't know the particulars of that, but I know from talking to the president that he wants to keep pre-existing conditions. He wants health care to be affordable and accessible for all, and that's the goal for everybody. The question is we have all these people, everybody in healthcare, everybody wants to live on the water. There's a lot of expenses, a lot of fat. What can we do as a country and that will lower the deficit ultimately, because the high rising prices of healthcare, to make it more affordable and more accessible to everybody? That's certainly a focus of the president.
I want to ask you about a couple questions right here in South Florida. The president has been outspoken in support for Juan Guaido in Venezuela, wanting to do away with the Maduro regime, wanting to bring democracy, something more enlightened to Venezuela. Why, though, at the same time, does he refuse to allow Venezuelans temporary protective status? Do you think that Venezuelans in this country who are now being deported on a regular basis should receive TPS?
I think everybody should be treated fairly, and I think listen, I think President Trump has had a huge amount of support from Venezuelans overall. Basically,
but should they get TPS?
That's something for the administration to decide. But I think that everybody should be treated fairly, and certainly everybody should be given the benefit of the doubt. And hopefully, if they're seeking refugee status or any of these statuses, they should be put at the front of the line.
All right, let's turn to a couple of things more in your wheelhouse out of Tallahassee, because as I said, you are a state senator. There are some controversial bills coming up, some of them with your name on them. I know in the last week or so, there were 4 bills that were considered anti-LGBT. Do you want to sort of address why?
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, because here's the deal. I filed the Inclusion Workforce Bill last year.
A year ago,
I
right.
sponsored the Competitive Workforce Act for years in the House.
Yes.
I live in Sarasota County. I think I reflect my community's views. I think the fact that they put that out, I'm very upset. I pushed back. I pushed back on social media. I called Equality Florida. I filed the bill over a month ago, and let me tell you what happened. My bill is about, it's about the preemption, and it's about predictive scheduling, making sure that businesses can continue on. It's about wage ordinances. Has nothing to do with discrimination and running over protected ordinance or protected special classes, whether at the people who are protected at the federal, state, or local ordinances. My bill has nothing to do with that. The fact that they came out and said it does upsets me. But in an overabundance of caution, what I did is I added language in the preamble. And go talk to attorneys out there. They will tell you that if for some reason somebody challenges these local ordinances based on my law, the intent, the legislative intent, which is in the preamble, and I've gotten cleared by attorneys before I filed it, I made sure that we were 100% in the clear to make sure that these local ordinances were protected. I think that you should not be fired for being gay. I think that these local ordinances play a role, and the local population should have a decision making. And it upset me because here I am trying to do the right thing, and including even added protections in the bill that I filed. And for them to say that it was anti-LGBTQ to me was preposterous. I pushed back. I'll continue to stand and listen. I'm doing my best to make sure that they continue to get the protections they need.
One of the bills, and I'll be honest with you, whether you're a sponsor of it or not, you can clarify for me, would legalize the controversial practice of gay conversion therapy. Do you believe gay conversion therapy is legitimate?
No, I'm against conversion therapy. I think it's a bad idea. I've talked to the person who filed that bill, and they said that doesn't have anything to do with their bill. I think what's happening is in order, and this is why people hate politics, because in order to try to score political points, they try to throw this stuff against the wall and try to say, listen, and it's, Republicans are bad, Republicans are anti-LGBTQ. That's not the case. I filed as the main sponsor of the Florida Inclusion Act last year, and have co-sponsored the Competitive Workforce Act. I'm trying to move the agenda forward. It's not, don't let people, don't always, I hate to say fake news, but what this
Please don't.
Yeah, but what this was is this was a gross mischaracterization of the facts, and like I said, I think it's clear where I am, and I'll continue to fight for what I believe is right.
And that's why I want to give you the opportunity to address it, because we see the headlines down here, and we don't get a chance to talk to you. One other area I do want to cover with you briefly. I know that there was a Senate bill that dealt with parental notification when it came to abortion for minors. The Senate recently amended the title of that bill in a way that would then allow other things related to abortion, some of the more strident language that the House often has, to come into that bill. Do you see that bill as now being a gateway to challenge Roe versus Wade, to bring in heartbeat legislation, fetal heartbeat legislation, those sorts of things? Where do you see the abortion issue going this year in Tallahassee?
Basically, it's a single issue deal. You know, I personally have a vote to try to prevent elective abortions based on disabilities and genetic testing. However, what this bill does, and the only bill that's going to pass the legislature, I believe it will pass, and I believe it will be signed into law, is this parental notification bill. And I think it's just common sense. I think, listen, if you want a tattoo, you got to get parental notification. So these are sometimes difficult surgeries. The parents should at least be notified and
so I just want to be clear. You're not in favor of a bill that would severely restrict overall abortion rights.
I am pro-life, but in the Florida legislature, the only thing that's going to be passed this year is this parental notification bill.
And last thing I just want to bring up with you, just to go back to politics in general, I know that you met on the tarmac when the president arrived with Carlos Jimenez. Carlos Jimenez recently announced that he's running for Congress against Debbie Murkowski-Powell here in South Florida. Give me your assessment of that race.
What an amazing opportunity we have as Republicans. He is probably the best candidate we ever could have asked for. We are so lucky to have him in his leadership. He is an absolute superstar. I think we're going to win that race. We're going to take it back, and we're all in with him. And he
no
is
concerns
going to be successful.
that he's admitted to having voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016?
Not at all. And I talked to the president about that in the car. But it's listen.
What did he say?
He was excited to have him on board.
He was excited that the guy who's running voted for Hillary Clinton?
He was excited that we were going to have him as our next congressman for this district because it's so important, because we have so many big issues that we're facing up in D.C., and we need more people that will fight for the people, and the mayor will do it.
Do you have any doubt? I mean, Carlos has obviously fully embraced Donald Trump, or seemed to. Do you have any doubts that he now fully embraces Donald Trump and Donald Trump's policies?
I think that he'll support the administration once he gets to Congress, and I think he'll be a wonderful congressman. I think he served this area with distinction, and I think he'll continue to serve with distinction up in D.C. and vote for what's the best interest of his community.
Joe Gruters, I want to thank you very much. Please come back. This was fun. We could do this for a lot longer, I have a feeling, but we'll cut it off there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, up next, former Miami Mayor Manny Diaz when we come back.